Welcome. Thank you, guys. This is super fun for me because I've been coming here doing Summit stuff for 9 years now, and finally get to be up on this stage. Thank you.
Thanks, I'm glad to be here.
So to start, I don't want to butcher it, so can you give a little bit of your background? Let's start on the military side and that piece of.
Sure. Behavioral scientist by trade. I have a doctorate, a couple master's degrees, all in some form of psychology, be it clinical, forensic, or applied. Did post-defense analysis after a master's on death row. What'd you do with the body? What'd you do after the crime? Moved into working in a classified life for our
I'm going to slow you down a little bit. So you spent you spent time on death row interviewing serial killers. How many did you work with?
I interviewed about 200 murderers, 35 serial rapists, and 13 mass murder serial killers. Yeah.
Why? What compelled you to do that?
Won a raffle, actually, at a local. No, I mean, by choice. Ultimately, I wanted to go in the FBI. I am a very big believer in serving your country in some form or fashion. Deep philanthropy, activism, and I thought the best skill set that I could apply psychology to was to go and capture violent criminals. And then we had this thing called 9/11. We invaded Iraq, and that's when I chose to leave death row and enter government service, and served there for 8 years in a classified manner. Worked in elicitation, so used psychology as a tool of influence against bad guys. Recruited some spies, interrogated some terrorists, and then left, consulted.
That's slow, so I need to down again. So is that all still classified, or can you talk a little bit about it?
I mean, some of it's classified. It sounds sexier than it is. But.
It's what? Sorry?
Sounds sexier than it is.
Yeah, I didn't think it sounds sexy, but it sounds interesting.
Well, you haven't heard the stories.
That's right. So that's what I'm going to get into. So you're pulled out. You interview again to over 200 death row inmates, and then get pulled into interrogating terrorists. Is basically what we're doing. Talk to me about that experience, like jumping. Were you using things you had learned in your studying of those inmates for like, hey, I know how these guys operate. What were the similarities, or were there similar characteristics to these terrorists and death row?
Yeah, I think where there's similar characteristics. I think tactically speaking, some of the most important things you can do across the board in any interview, truly, whether you're interviewing someone to work at your company, a death row inmate, or recruiting a spy, is truly creating an environment where that individual wants to cooperate in a meaningful way. And you do that by showing tremendous interest through curiosity and being able to be truly empathic. And I mean that in its purest form. The word has lost its value, but to truly be able to connect with someone in a manner that they might understand. The concept evil is thrown around tremendously. It's overblown. And at some level, to be so far in behavior, maybe, but to be able to close the gap and say we're both human, I want to understand what led to this behavior. No one wakes up one day and says, I'm going to be a serial killer. No one is born evil. They truly evolve there from a dynamic. Maybe it's a little bit of genetics. Maybe it's a little bit of rearing and sociocultural things. But ultimately, I have a deep amount of empathy for that end state. And that, I think, helped in every former interview I did.
And so focusing on the serial killer side, what are those triggers? Like what were the consistencies across those 250? And what were the surprises? Like how did that look?
Yeah, I think, really think about this for a minute. Jokingly, I did an interview, and I don't do much public at all. I don't do any social media at all. But when you look at a serial killer or you look at a founder, there are people, they're identical. No, they, same questions. You have to understand, someone who has a cyclical pattern of killing does it for a variety of reasons. In some form, a person wakes up with this deep, deep urge, I must kill. And that sometimes the killing is to reduce that drive, that urge. It might be, I've got to go dominate. I've got to create a power situation. It might be omnipotence. I want to be the individual that goes down as the most prolific killer. I just want to be famous. To bucket them all together is not only unhealthy, it's unsophisticated, because to understand what matters to them, understand that there's a spectrum of why people kill. Evaluating founders, or even all the coaching I do with founders, there are some founders who want to disrupt some deep-seated belief the world has. There are some who just want to own data. They want to be the biggest owner of data. There are some who just want to kill their competition. So when I am eliciting behavior to deeply understand the motivational levers of people, there is a massive spectrum that I am operating and building my questions and platform of influence against. But what I really need to understand is why they want to do that. I'm going to say something that's going to be a bit provocative. You wake up every morning, you're going to do what you want, when you want, why you want. You are. I don't care if that's wake up and I'm going to cut someone's head off, or if you wake up and you're going to dig deep in Canva. That's what, now you go, now you may go, that's not true. I actually don't want to be overweight. I actually don't want to be unhealthy. You actually do. You actually do. That's why you're doing it. Ideally, you don't. You want to work out. You want, but you've got to want to do that more than you want to sit on the couch. You've got to want to code more than you want to scroll Instagram. And so when I look at founders and I look at their motivational levers and I look at serial killers, I was looking at cyclical maladaptive patterns that got in the way of actualizing on their drive. We all have willingness and capabilities. Everybody in this room has a willingness. And then there's capabilities, but there are things that get in the way of that. So when I'm profiling a founder to deploy capital to, I'm looking at what are their motivational levers, what are their cyclical maladaptive patterns are relating to others, and what is going to get in the way of their accessing their motivation.
And now, just for the people that didn't do the research before this, I'm going to speed you up. Post-military, you decide you want to get into the private sector, and
I did,
and just stumbled into a pretty big role.
I left the military I wanted to take this tradecraft of profiling and use it in litigation. So understanding judges, understanding jurors, and taking the empiricism around behavioral science and picking juries. There are a lot of hand-wavy people out there who think they know, but they don't base it in research. They don't base it in studying or measuring. We took our tradecraft, elicitation, influence, recruitment, interrogation, and profiling, and applied it to trials. We're going to win trials, and I loved it. And then I met this guy named Evan Spiegel. He had a little small company called Snapchat, about 40 people, and he deeply appreciated the application of behavioral science across the board, to product, to ethical decision-making, to assessment selection, to scaling, and he hired me as a director of special projects, and eventually I grew it to a couple thousand people and took it public.
Yeah, so chief people officer of Snapchat after terrorist interrogation. But the reason I wanted to highlight that is so the opinions and what we're going to be talking about today is a lot about how those are similar, how they're different, and what drives both of those. And so I just want to recap that. And so when it comes now going back to your experience overseas and in the military, what was surprising you about you? That you said you had a lot of empathy for these people you were working with, and I understand the way you're using that. What was that experience like?
I really did believe that the best, most reliable information. Think about four things. One, we really need to build, whether you believe in the war or not, that's not my job. My job is to serve my country as deployed the way that a senior leader thinks I'm fit. I really deeply believed that in order to create a country that was safe for schooling, safe for voting, we had to win the hearts and minds of that population. And sometimes that means bringing medicine into a village. Sometimes that means paying people. Sometimes that means paying extremely violent people. And I really thought deeply to understand their plight. And there was a book written, I'm not going to promote the book because it comes off a kind of like an apologist book, but it really helped me and my team develop an understanding of what the enemy thought of us. And to influence anybody, you really have to understand this. I don't care if you're closing a deal, if you're trying to win an argument, or you're trying to build connective tissue with someone you want to build a relationship with. Think of this. Think of, in that moment of intensity, what do they really want you to feel about them? And here's what gets in the way. You're still pissed off at your boyfriend. You're still pissed off at your girlfriend. You have some bias, you have some prejudice. It gets in the way. Maybe you want to be right. Maybe you want to be famous. Maybe you want to look good in front of your boss. If you can wipe that out and be present and sit in front of someone and think, what are they trying to make me feel about them? And what do they want me to notice? If you can do that, if you can see what they want you to notice and understand what they want you to feel about them, you can move them. I said move, I don't mean manipulate. You can do that too, but move. You can connect with them. I deeply believe that rapport-based connective tissue is the most durable way to build relationships that work over time. If I treat you like a freaking paper plate, you're gonna know it in the end. But if I treat you like a piece of china, I dine on you, I eat off of you, you do the same to me, and we go on a shelf. When we see each other, we can connect. Now, it's not that way always. Sometimes people just hate you, and they don't want to work with you. And there's other methods for that. But I really did want to understand what the objection was to me understanding your plight. That might have meant taking a picture out of my helmet of my kids. Here's my wife and my kids. I'm a dad too. I'm not fucking around. This is really my kid. I want him or her to see I'm a dad and that's my child. This isn't a cutout from a magazine. This isn't a picture of someone. This really is my kid. Nobody wants to be in this. So I really genuinely believe that rapport-based influence was the strongest way.
And did you ever have trouble with, this is someone that could be behind a bombing of your friends, this could be someone that was behind 9/11, one of these things, and you're now building rapport with this person and trying to relate. Like, was there ever a cognitive dissonance there, or some conflict, or was it just you were doing your job and were running the program?
Never. I was perfect. Next question.
Yeah, perfect. Let's move on.
No, honestly, I think of two really deep occasions. One involved an individual who hurt some kids, and I believe intentionally to create the most devastating terroristic effect that he could have. When I feel it, I really would go do push-ups in another room before we entered in that type of interrogation. But if there's something bigger to focus on to redirect, you have to have something bigger. And I think that's why the best leaders in the world create such prolific mission orientation. This isn't about me and a guy and him protecting information and me interrogating him or trying to recruit him as an asset. It's something bigger. And if I keep that bigger thing in mind, it really helped moderate my emotions and mitigate risk. It's hard to do, but there's a lot of ways to do that.
In terms of interrogations, I know there's been criticism during that era of how that was handled, et cetera. What are your thoughts on that with the more aggressive types of interrogation? Is it a necessary thing? Do you have what's your view on that? I'm curious. I've heard it doesn't work. You've been in the room.
Yeah, I think to answer that question would be foolish and unsophisticated to say louder, aggressive doesn't work. I think that there's extremes that are borderline inhumane. I think there's also torture. There's no doubt about that. And I think that the individuals with whom I worked, I never saw anything that was not safe, legal, ethical, and effective. And I mean that. And I stand by everything that we did. And I can't speak for everyone about that. But I would say that the individuals with whom I spent time eliciting information, that was true. Now, there are individuals I know did bad things that were outside the scope of what we were authorized to do by the president and executive orders, and they paid the price. And in every job, there are going to be some rogue agents. Every job, whether it's a bad cop, a bad CEO, a bad executive, and partly why we're sitting on the stage.
Are we rogue? So what made you want to get out of it? You mentioned obviously going into litigation and everything. Why did you want to get out of your service?
I think for me personally, I jokingly say this. I can, as a clinician, a doctor, I can diagnose mental retardation. I can call you a genius with an IQ test. I've seen 18-year-olds dive on a grenade. I've seen the best in the world do the best things they can. I've seen the worst be the worst they can be. Ultimately, I wanted to take a skill set and look at it in the corporate world. I wanted to apply this in a non-strategic manner, everything we did, and see how well we could help, whether it's a startup, whether it's business, whether it is litigation. I just really was genuinely fascinated by the behavioral science in corporate America.
And so stepping into that, I'm actually going to skip the trial stuff and go to Snap. going to the topic at hand, you're working with Evan Spiegel, a remarkable entrepreneur, and are there similarities and what are the similarities and differences serial killers and founders and high performers? Like, do you actually, I already heard the joke today that it's like, well, serial killers are technically high performers of the killer world, but like, psychologically, do you actually find that there are things that coincide?
This is not a reflection of Evan at all. I think he's one of the best leaders the world's ever created and is really ethical by design. But when we look at a psychopath, I want you to really think about this. The definition of a psychopath is some of the most elite criminals. And I'll give you some characteristics I want you to think about and compare them to someone, your brother-in-law or your sister. And go, I'm telling you, this guy called you out, Cindy, you're out. There are things that are thrown around, and a psychopath is bad news. Bad news. They're more likely to commit violent crime. They're more likely to repeat crime, a variety of crimes, recidivate once they're left out of prison. But psychopathic traits, if I list them out to you, sensation seeking, okay? Maybe that's also a founder who says, I'm gonna take on the hardest roles in the world. Low anxiety. Great. That means that no problem creates a lot of problems for me psychologically. Glib, superficial, charming. Great. That means that they can court influence and hire the best people. Or lack of remorse or guilt. I don't mind crushing my competition. Having shallow affect, shallow emotions. I'm not married to a bad hire. I will eliminate a bad hire fast. I don't have a lot of guilt about that. So these are traits that can make you an incredible parasitic lifestyle. I live off other people. I raise a ton of capital and use their capital. These traits can be extremely helpful if deployed in the right manner. However, if they're used for evil or they're used to exploit and hurt people, they were drifting, that's a slippery slope. Elizabeth Holmes, tremendous psychopathic traits. Bernie Madoff, I will tell you right now, there are serial killers I've interviewed that pale compared to him. He destroyed generations without remorse. He didn't kill anybody, but deaths are in his hands. He's got blood on his hands. Did he kill? Was he a serial killer? Did he hang people up? Did he torture them? No, people are still tortured by his behavior. And I'm not taking anything away from Ted Bundy's victims. I'm heightening the victimology of someone like a Madoff. So I remember, I'll share one story if that's okay. I did 4 years United States Penitentiary, 2 years death row, and 1 year not guilty by reason of insanity. My doctorate and master's, a lot of school. But I remember my boss said, Jason, you've done nothing but violent crime. I want you to go do this camp. There's a camp inside of a violent institution. And it was nothing but white-collar criminals. And I felt like a kid in a candy store. And I'll tell you why. I got to see very high-level sophistication. These are book hookers. These are CEOs. Just exquisite PhD-level white-collar crime. And I honestly could have stayed there years. I absolutely loved it. And when I really saw that, I went, wow, well, he didn't wake up successful. That psychopathy is what got him up there. Eventually, though, he got caught. He got hemmed up. And I think spending time with that, when I evaluate a founder, I want you to really hear me out. I don't do it in an exploitative way. I want the founder to want to connect with me. And I can tell they're guarded. They're like, oh, this guy's gonna fucking interrogate me. It's gonna be weird. It's really not. I'm failing if I'm doing that. I want a very comfortable situation. The majority of time we deploy capital, I actually end up becoming their coach, if that tells you how well it goes. Here's the deal. This group, Summit individuals, are exquisitely creative. And they're deeply interested, they're appreciative, and they're tolerant. Those are gifted traits. If I sat a founder down and said, tell me why he or she is going to do this company, you'd do pretty well. If I helped you a little bit get out of your own way with bias, but here's the problem. There are a ton of people with big ideas. There are a ton of people who can do it a little bit. There are a ton of people who do it a little while. What really makes someone a game changer? If I told you, I want you to identify the cyclical maladaptive patterns that Erik has in relating interpersonally to other people. I want you to show me the biases he has in hiring. I want you to show me what he does when he's uncomfortable. I want you to show me how formless he is in his ability or inability to connect with certain demographics or socioeconomics. Can you build workable teams? I deeply believe we will spend $10 million on a evaluation of this hotel's infrastructure. We will. Before we buy it. We'll pay an engineer $10 million to come in here and kick tires. We'll put $150 million with a founder, hand wavy, seems pretty good. We interviewed him. I had 2 other founders look at him. They're not clinically trained. They have not played with snakes like I have, and they have not seen the extremes of human behavior. And so I wanted to take that and say, oh, let me go see what this will do in the corporate world. That's why I ended up there.
Perfect answer. You've told me a little bit about this, but talk about your interview process in that sense. Like you know, now this is what you wanted to take to it, and what have you learned about like when you are turning the tables on trying to figure out, are you hiring this executive? Is this going to be a good founder that invest in, or an executive for that team? Is it this complex algorithm that you've built that's all scientific now, or is it one question? How do you dive into that?
I use one light and smoke a lot, and we interview. I think I look at if there's a universal application I want, and I'll share 2 things. Here are the 5 traits I look for. I'm unapologetically open about these traits. I want to see how formless you are. There are tons of guys that I interview do very well influencing and leading other white guys. There are tons of guys I interviewed that do very well leading other white guys, guys of Asian descent. But there are tons of guys I interview that don't interview other demographics well. So formlessness is your ability to build connective tissue with a variety of individuals across the world demographically, from an ethnic standpoint to socioeconomic status. Now look, a lot of people say, I can do it, let me show you. I believe them because most of the people we're interviewing are successful founders. But how much cognitive and emotional load does it really put you under to do it? To sit with, someone not like you. I can do it, I know, but you're gritting your teeth, which means you're not present, which means you're not if you don't know what you're putting out, you're highly exploitable. When I sit with someone and they think they know what they're putting out, I'm like, perfect, I can move you. The second,
real quick, how do you test for that?
Let me think of a scenario that's pretty applicable. Let me tell a fictitious story here. We had a founder that was going to get a big check. And I remember there was this argument on whether or not he was high in empathy. And the product, the campaign, the brand, empathy was going to be it. And then there was an argument in the investment committee, or even the previous investors were like, does he really have to be empathetic? I said, he absolutely does. And I said he was not, and they thought he was, and they were fooled. So how do you measure empathy? Tell me a question that helps you measure empathy. We talk about it. How do you evaluate empathy? Raise your hand if you can tell me how to evaluate empathy, if it's so important. Great. I'm not going to call on you because I appreciate your courage. 2 people in this room. But when I earlier said empathy's so important, everybody's like, yes, it is. Your mouth should be overflowing with examples right now. You should be like, here's my question, call on me. 2 people. One of them has to go to the bathroom. You can go. Sorry, I thought that. I really will tell you one of the best questions is this. Tell me an employee or a teammate you've worked with that's been misunderstood and why. And man, this guy couldn't do it. He also got in trouble once, and I want to measure the impact. So I'll give you an example. He burned down this fund, burned it down. Tell me the impact of burning this fund down. Oh, it's terrible. It's absolutely horrible. And I'm like, oh, wow, those are, and in my mind I'm going, nope, he's remorseful. No, that's a word, terrible. And I go, help me understand terrible. And he's like, well, it's very embarrassing for me. Oh, got it. I said, God, it is, yeah. And then I said, well, what else? And he said, he's scraping, and he goes, well, my family, and, I go, oh, good. He's thinking about the impact it has onto his family. Well, what does that mean? He goes, my wife almost divorced me. She's not going to find somebody as good as me. I'm like, oh, my God. And I'm telling you that because when I'm thinking about the impact it had, how much remorse. So that's one way I look at it. And so I hope I'm targeting the question right.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. All right, so number 2 to bring you back on it.
The 2 is frustration tolerance. And I don't mean this. I mean, when I say frustration, we think about what we do when someone's in traffic in front of us, when someone's in line and they won't walk fast enough. Here's what I really mean by frustration tolerance. What do you do when you're uncomfortable? What do you do when you're uncomfortable as a leader? The best in the world double down on their skill set. If a downhill skier, Olympic level, she catches her edge and that ski's flailing, she doesn't eat it. She does everything she possibly can to do what? To get her ski back under her. But the worst escape, they just fall. That means when you're frustrated at work, do you interrupt? Maybe do you, no. I mean, do you gossip? Do you over-disclose? Do you give away power? Do you go get drunk? Do you start beating up employees? Do you make decisions based on bias? So I'm measuring frustration tolerance in that form. Now you think, how the heck do I get those questions out of someone? I'll get to it in just a minute, I promise you. The third thing I look for is locus of control and responsibility. How much do you think the world happens to you versus you happen to the world? There's an internal locus of control and an external locus of control. There's an internal locus of responsibility and external locus of responsibility. During the last 3 years, fundraising was quite difficult for a lot of founders. I couldn't wait to sit down. And I asked him, you struggled raising money. That's why we're here. Yeah, the market sucks. VCs are tepid. They won't listen. Not one time did I hear him talk about him. Not, I was doing poorly. I didn't adapt. My language and my narrative, the appeal, the value prop of my product. I'm looking for that. When someone screws up, blame someone else, they're not going to grow. And that leads me to the fourth one, which is a openness to experience. I am intoxicated by individuals who have a deep beginner's mindset. And people go, oh, I'm always learning. Great, how? Oh, I read all the time. Great, what else? You read. You didn't tell me one thought partner you have that keeps you accountable. You haven't told me this core of disputatious people that get around you and tune you up, that you welcome. A leadership style when you get in a meeting, and Paul's your name? Okay, Paul might deeply agree with me, and it's scary. We agree a lot. I don't know Paul, I'm not punking him out here. But I would say, Paul, I know we agree, but I need you to take the other side of this. I want you to assassinate my idea. Like, come at me. Do you really want that? And I'll tell you, it's a Zen Buddhist, Suzuki, I think. Shoshin was the name of it, where beginner's mindset. And the last one is just can you build workable teams? Founders cannot hire well at all. They can't.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
And so going back to the second one, how do you test for frustration as well?
Yeah, frustration tolerance. I will tell you this. I like someone who cannot wait to tell me how screwed up they are. And it does two things for me. One is we all are. If you think you don't have issues, that's your number one issue. I love that. And I think when I see someone who's like, yeah, I can't believe I did that. I'm so dumb. Sometimes I disclose where I'm jacked up. It's one of the first things I do. I don't do it as a tool of influence. I do it really to connect, which in turn, I think they do reciprocate. But I'm not like, oh, I've got to tell them mine. I do it because here's the problem. Imagine being on a date and you're as open in the first date as you are the 9th year you're married or in a relationship. You would run that person off. You would. But there'd be something really cool about that. Like, wait a minute, I'm actually super attracted to her. She's like, here I am, take me or leave me. Because deep down, we all know what we're seeing at a date is super high impression management. Super high. We don't care because we are too. So it kind of nets out. Like, I'm not really me, you're not really you, but let's just hang out with these fake people for a year. And then we'll figure out if we really like each other. But I think that a little part of people don't want to lie to me, to be honest. I think being an expert in detecting deception doesn't help them want to lie. But I'm really reinforcing of tell me what's wrong with you, because I don't think it's wrong. I think showing me awareness is one of the most endearing things a human can do.
So do you actually, when you're going into an interview with Snap or other companies you're with, do you tell them your background? They're like, listen, I've met hundreds of serial killers. You're not going to faze me. Just tell me what's wrong with you.
I'm actually, one of the big immediate red flags is when people don't do research on, it's so easy to do research. I mean, it gives you an edge, and my team will data scrape you. We will find everything you have tweeted, posted. We're going to find it. And that's okay. We all screw up at 2:30 a.m. in Vegas. How frequently do you screw up? How bad is it? And how long does it last is what really matters to us. And I think that I tell them up front, the worst thing I can do is not be able to measure you. If I'm writing your answers down, I'm going to go in and I'm going to write a profile that says I have an intellectualized version of you. There's not a single founder that doesn't have a section that I profiled of indicting things. What I hope you can do is talk about them and show me insight and that you're introspective. And I tell them that up front. This is how you win, is you show. Now, sometimes I get things sprinkled on me like, oh, this, and I'm like, nope. I think, no, it wasn't your company I was talking to, but we found something egregious by a guy. I'll keep it very quick, and let me change a couple things real quick in my head. Okay, so.
I was like, we haven't done this yet, but maybe you've done your research.
Had an individual, absolutely squeaky clean. He's gorgeous. This dude is very good looking. He is very smart. He is just great, absolutely great. And my team says, except for this. And they show it to me, and I'm like, there's no way that's him. They're like, oh, it's him. I'm like, you better double check. And like, we triple checked, it's him. So it's a tweet 7 years ago. It's 2:30 a.m. and it's geopinned to the Reno area. And that's why I was joking about it. And I'm like, uh-oh. So I tell the individuals about it, and it's a very derogatory statement about the opposite gender who works in the sex industry. And I went, wow. So sat him down, and half the room is like, forget it, we're out. This guy, no way. I'm like, okay. So the other half's like, we'll see what Jason says. And so I sit him down, and I go, I'll call him Scott. I said, Scott, and I've changed some things up, just so you know. I said, Scott, remember when I asked you if I was going to find anything, my team was going to find anything on you? He's like, yep. I said, do you remember your answer? He said, yep. I said, what exactly was your answer? And I said, you weren't going to find anything. And I go, why do you think I'm sitting here? He's like, because you found something. And I said, Scott, why would you say that? Why would you say, I didn't think you were going to find anything? And words matter. Like, I'm the guy. I travel the world and train people on how to use words. He goes, because I didn't think that you would find it. Now please don't groan. I kind of like that he said that, all right? So I said, well, now words matter. And I said, Scott, what did I find? And he goes, you found a tweet. And I looked at him like, what? And he was like, looked at me going, uh-oh. And I looked at him, and I went through my paperwork. Look, if I say, well, we found the tweet, what have I done? I need him to think I found something else just in case there is something else. If I say, Scott, I caught you, I found the tweet. He's like, yep, you caught the tweet. There might be 60 other things out there, right? So I said, what did I find? He's like, you found the tweet. Not a tweet, the tweet. That word matters to me, right? The tweet. Now that was a gamble because what if there were other stuff and I found other stuff? He went and he's like, you found the tweet. I go, what else did I find? He's like, nothing, because there's nothing out there. There wasn't. We rang this rag. So I said, why did you do this? He's like, because it was 2:30 in the morning. I had never done cocaine. I was drunk. And I go, why did it take you, let me make something up, 5 months to take it? He's like, I didn't even realize I did it. And he was a prolific user of Twitter at the time. And it did kind of get buried. And he's like, my friend screenshot it and go, hey, bro. And he's like, oh, my God. He's like, I didn't remember doing it. So when I walked him through that whole scenario, I said, what should we think? And he was like, look, I would not trust. I can understand why you wouldn't trust. I would hope that you see my body of work. I hope you would see it as a one-off. What do you think? And I walked him through it. And he was remorseful, and he was apologetic, and it was genuine. He showed insight. It was one frequency, and he got the investment. He did. And I'm glad that he did, because I cared more about his remorse, the frequency, the intensity, the duration, his ability to be honest when caught, right? And I didn't think there was anything else. This was a few years ago. Things are going great, right? Now, here's the problem. There's a little bit of branding in there. If I burn him, I get someone to tell me the truth, and they are remorseful, and they show insight, they're introspective, and I burn them, the word spreads, you can't be honest with Doc J. He says you can, you can't. I want that. I can't. That's hugely important to me to maintain my integrity, because my word matters so much in these. Just be honest with us, because we're going to find it. And I'd rather you put it on the table so we don't have to find it. So, yeah.
And just so you guys know, we're going to, in about 5 minutes, we open it up for questions. So think about what you would want to ask this man. And bringing it back around to the, as you've been working with different founders, as you said, there's these sociopathic tendencies that used for good tend to lead to good outcomes. And we say tendencies. You wouldn't call that person a sociopath at that point, or a psychopath, would you?
Sociopathy is a term used for people that are just, the science thinks you're raised. Psychopath means you have a genetic proclivity for it. So they're interchangeable, but it's the school of thought.
Got it. And so why does that line get crossed? The person that, has a high degree of anxiety tolerance and all these things, like, why does all of a sudden that turn into being used for evil? What does make them go over the line there?
Another difficult question, because I think it's different for many people. But I don't think many people who are good founders, they do bad things sometimes. They do. Some believe it'll be one and done. Some believe that it's for a greater good. That rationalization gets you in trouble. However, if you look at why people choose not to do things and why they choose to do things, really listen to why. If right now I ask a group of individuals why they don't, very evil people, let's just say, why they don't, a group of normal individuals, why don't you engage in unhealthy sexual behavior with minors? If their answer is, well, because it's illegal, that scares me, right? So that versus it's horrific, it ruins lives, it's going to create terror, torture, and trauma in that kid. By the way, it would do nothing for me. That's why. If it's an infrastructure on why we don't do things, then you start playing games in your head. And a founder will say, I didn't think I was going to fake these results on this test, but because the FDA is too stringent, unapologetic, won't see it, I'm going to do it for the greater good. That is a problem with even interrogation, right? That person's evil. They just hurt kids. This is for our nation. No, there is right, there is wrong. Is it safe, legal, ethical, and effective, regardless of circumstance? And I think that when infrastructure is why, people start toying with that versus, is this, remember, safe before legal, legal before ethical, ethical before effective. I think I watch people start twisting infrastructure.
Makes sense. And so a couple quick rapid fire things, because I've seen you do this before. Sure. You have a ton of experience with psychopaths, and then a ton of experience with executives. Favorite interview question and things people should know to protect themselves.
Oh, wow.
By the way, he did a talk for me, the YPO event, where he, this is like curved. He literally jumped back and forth from side to side in these two topics. So.
Oh yeah, I think favorite interview question, hear me out. I'm gonna do it very, very fast. Okay, if I had one interview question, I would say this. I would say one of the things that gets people upset is we hired this person, they weren't as good as they said they were, right? They end up being fake juice, we call them. If I sit you down and I say, Keith, hear me out. We're not going to interview you for 2 hours. I'm going to walk out of this room and go get a cup of coffee. You have 3 minutes. I want you to think about your most significant accomplishment to date. The thing you have done, not you and 40 people, not your boss told you to do. What have you done, your most significant accomplishment to date, that you think, if told well, gives us your appeal and the value proposition for joining my company? And I'm going to ask you to talk uninterrupted. Uninterrupted. You go. And I'm going to listen to you. If I'm asking questions, you're not being detailed enough, okay? You might go, I'm ready. Nope, everybody gets 3 minutes. I'm going to get my coffee. I literally go get coffee. I do it. I want everybody to have the same. I come back and I say, go. Here's what happens. He either did it or he didn't do it. He better pick something he knows intimate details on, not something he was a part of, not something his boss led, not something your subordinates did that you call your own. 2, I measure how well you communicate. Are you fluid? Do you have a good working memory? Are you dynamic? Are you organized? 3, I get to see what matters to you, and I get to see what you value, and I see your self-worth. I did this. Then I get to see you take questions on that. And the bottom line is I get to see if you did it. That's 1. Here's the other one. If I say, someone wrote a book about your life, what would the title be? People go, very quickly, give me 20 seconds, Erik. I had this brilliant woman marketer about to get a 20 million deal at one of the most incredible product companies in the world. I interview her and I say, I don't like her. And I don't say these things out loud. I don't believe in superlatives in interview. I didn't like her because I didn't think she was creative. The room of billion-dollar executives thought she was the most creative person in the world. I didn't. So I come back in, we sit in a panel interview, and I say, Jenny's her name? Not really. Jenny, if someone wrote a book about your life, what would the title be? Watch this. Keep in mind, she's about to lead marketing for one of the most incredible product companies in the world. She's like, oh God, something about, one of these questions. Something about, I sit there patiently. Here's what I'm looking for. What you're seeing is what it's like working with her right there. I'm seeing how fast she is creatively. I'm seeing when tasked with something that puts her under a cognitive load, she is activated negatively. She leans back, she crosses her leg, she hand waves like, get out of here like a fly. It's disgusting. And I'm like, wow. And guess who didn't like her? It was another female executive who said, I don't think she would be enjoyable to work with. That was in her note. She says, it would be something about, and I finally said, Jenny, it has to have her exact title. So then she says, it would be dirt road volleyball player. And I'm like, and before I could say what I say, she goes, is that good enough? I'm like, wow. So I go, actually, colon. She's like, what? Oh, that's not good enough. Colon, something again. She's not having fun. She's not leaning into me. She's not playful. And for God's sake, playfulness is one of the most under-recognized, valuable traits you can look for in a human. You can be as intense as me and super playful. Trust me. She wasn't. Then, who would write your foreword? She blows it. Then I say, if the book started with the first sentence and ended with the same sentence on last, what would it be? She's like, I can't answer that. Didn't even try. That 4.5 minutes cost her $20 million because she's not playful. And this is a playful company. And I remember I didn't have to say anything. That question, if someone wrote a book about your life, it's fun. Lean into it. Enjoy it. And by the way, your whole job is content creation. You should be intoxicated by that question. So
it's actually a fun thought process. The last question, protecting yourself, crazy world. You have some real sights into that.
All right, look, I do this thing called the Predator Brief all over the world on how to protect yourself and family. Ultimately, here's what happens. Okay, raise your hand if you have kids. All right, raise your hand if you know what kid you care about. Great. Let me leave you with this. I go out on stage and I've spent thousands of hours with the most evil people, brilliant people, smart people in the world. I show a violin. kid playing a violin. I show a kid throwing a baseball and a girl hitting a volleyball. And I ask parents, who's taught their kid how to do this? Speaking of 1,000 hours, that's what it takes to perfect it. Have you spent 1 hour telling your kid what to do in a house fire? Teach them how to code, teach them how to draw, 1 hour what to do. Don't worry. They have 3 things. They roll and wait, they go to you, or they go to a rally point. That's okay. Do you have a fire extinguisher? Anybody have a fire extinguisher in their house? They know how to use it? Great. You better learn to fight with it. You're 5 times more likely to have a home invasion than a house fire. Learn to fight with it. That's okay. I would never answer the door. If someone knocks on my door, I say, no, thank you. I know what bad guys do. You should too. You know what you just told that bad guy? I'm home alone. That's what you said. But don't worry, he has a key. That apartment, condo you live in, 17 people have lived in it before you. They have a key too. Here's the deal. When someone knocks on your door, kindly ask them to step back 6 feet. You're trying to disrupt their thinking. They want to move on. I'm going to be graphic because I want this to leave. Raise your hand if you can think of one time you or someone has found a dead woman in a parking lot of Walmart. Never. Where do you find them? In the woods later. Why? Because they froze and cooperated. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to scare you because there's something to be scared of. You fight in that parking lot. Do you understand me? Here's the problem. If right now you go home to your condo and there's someone sitting on the stairs, you'll walk right by their happy butt because you'll say they belong there. There must be waiting on someone. They're smoking a cigarette. If I get home to my house and there's someone sitting on the stairs of my house, it's going to get weird real fast. Why? Because we put a social premium on the fear of looking stupid more than fear of pain. You don't have to be mean, you don't have to be rude, but you better be assertive. Because bad guys don't want to mess with assertive people. That doesn't mean stare someone down. It doesn't mean be antagonistic. It means be assertive. I have interviewed a lot of bad guys. They want nothing to do with someone who's prepared. They fantasize day in and day out about, it's going to go well. It's going to cooperate. No, she is going to headbutt you, fall on her back, and kick. Don't run. Fall on your back and kick in that parking lot. Okay?
All right, open it up for questions.
Thank you so much for both of you for this very amusing, honest, real kickoff on our first day. Jason, as a fellow behavior psychology enthusiast and professional, how do you really know that they're being honest because they're super smart, they're super persuasive and manipulative? When you get these stories and you check it against what they've said, and are they, being consistent, and there's so many ways to assess that. It takes me back to the 90s with primal fear.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how do you really know they're being honest with you with your rapport stories and your family? Like, they could be so smart, to not use derogatory terms, to just believe in this crap and be so agile at it. So how do you really know they're being honest and connecting with you?
I don't. And I think even when I say the most narcissistic thing I'll say, maybe not tonight, I'll get worse, but in this meeting, is I'm incrementally better at detecting deception, all right? And I think that I don't care about deception, I care more about anxiety. And if I'm looking at someone tell me, I'm gonna be very, very explicit about this. I'd rather have my eyes closed, not hear them, see them, and read what they say. Content analysis is much more indicative of deception than anything anybody you hear or see. That is driven by bias, driven by gut. If I make someone write an alibi, if I make someone tell me, I'm like, Content analysis is dope. And I love it. And I could read, I love it. And I think that these gut intuition stuff, run. The other thing is, it's hard to evaluate a 22-year-old because he or she's only 22. If you have 40 years, 50 years, if you are psychopathic, if you are being deceptive, it likely manifested in certain ways. And So I think I feel a little better with longevity, or you're just really good, right? I only study the ones that got caught. That's what I always say. And so the worst of the best, are the best of the worst I have never met. Yeah. And so I think that's it. I think content analysis is better. And when I feel like someone is being deceptive, think about this. What is the cost to believing their lie? We kind of say they're lying, right? What's the cost if we believe it? What is the cost if they win? Most of the time we say they're lying because they're trying to get something. Sometimes we're lying. This room, majority of the reasons you lie are not to get something. Deep down, put me in a dark room with you, it's because you're hiding shame. It's shame. That's what you're lying. You're lying to conceal something that's going to make you look bad. That's why most people do lie. So is it for gain or to protect against shame? So hard way of me chronically evading your answer. But I would tell you that's what I do. I believe I don't, but content's more important. What are they lying for? What would happen if you believe it? What happens if not? And why people lie. So, yeah. Remember, 2 types of lies. Overtly lying, committing a lie, and omitting, leaving information out, a little different. Yes?
Yeah, so Jason, great chat. Thank you so much. Any general themes when you're in opposition to a psychopath, either competing in business or civil dispute or something personal, but you're standing opposed? Any general strategies you think about? Like, are you looking for a motive? Are you trying to get them to go across the line? I'm just curious to how you'd think about entangling with them.
Tell me what you're defending against. Tell me what if you lose. Give me the scenario if you lose.
Someone doesn't stop bothering or hurting people you care about because they're just going to keep doing that in a complex family structure. Continuing to poach employees or to say things that cut the edge that hurt your business because they're willing to go past that because there's no empathy that exists.
Yeah. So in that scenario, you told me there's tremendous rationalization of behavior. And what happens is they move the line until it pushes you, right? They swing their fist, then it hits you. But because they're so charming and they're so smart, they'll give you an intellectual reason why it happened. Or with narcissism, it'll be your fault, right? It's your fault. And you're like, damn, I do kind of own part of this. And because you're healthy and you have an internal locus of control, you own your part because I'm sure there's some part you played in it. But because you're healthy, you split it. You go, okay, won't happen again. It's a behavior. Who cares did it hurt you? Did it not? If it's repetitive, it's on you, pal. It is on you. The hardest thing to do is to build and respect boundaries with unhealthy people that we share love or DNA with. It is the hardest thing to do in the world because we love them. We want them in our life. We just remember the great times. We forget the bad times. Then they make a promise and a plea. Then we indict ourselves for holding a grudge. You can have boundaries. That's not a grudge. That's boundaries. And they'll work you over like a lollipop. They will to get to that center, and they're good at it. And then now it's guilt. But I say this all the time. I constantly look at parents, and I do some parenting consultation. It is not your kid's fault you can't manage your stress. No kid should ever look at you coming home going, is Dad in a good mood? Mom feeling it today? Uh-oh, shit, nope, come on. No, right? It is on you 100% to protect your healthy employees. Don't get married to that. And I think it's the behavior, not their excuse, their rationalization or explanation, because that's really on you. He or she, mostly most psychopaths are males, are pulling on you. That's what they're doing, especially if you're healthy. If you're another psychopath, you see right through it. Right?
One more question. Who has the best question of the night? That's a lot of fucking pressure.
Better nail it, yeah.
All right, well, shit. I'm just really curious because you're so adept at studying motivation. when you look maybe from an investor's lens, or if you're a founder wanting to bet on yourself even, when you look at all the different motivational factors, right? Some founders want to just build a masterpiece. Some want to solve a problem that's just so unique and painful to them. They want to solve their own problem. Some people just feel like they weren't seen in the world and were just outcasts, and they want to build the biggest empire so the world can finally see them, right? There's so many different motivational factors that carry different frequency of fuel. And so I'm curious, of all the different motivations you've seen across founders, have you seen any patterns which actually yield the highest success?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm glad we planted it for the end. No, we didn't. I've never met him. I'll tell you what, I'm really speaking to the heart of your question, but I have to manipulate it a little bit. Okay. When I see a founder who is extremely mission-oriented, I don't see a boy who got beat up. I don't see a girl who wasn't pretty. I think that's part of them. But I see a mission that is real, and it does three things. One is it changes the complexion of something that we believe will never happen. Some people call that delusional. Mm-hmm. I think Evan Spiegel fundamentally changed the way human beings communicate. No one ever thought that would happen. We went from grunting to storytelling to telegraph to phones to pictures. When he made decisions around product and growth, what he sacrificed for growth is insanity, or it's super ethical. And I see this, I could be this behemoth giant and grow to 1 billion. No, you're only going to send to 16 people. We're not going to perpetuate fake news. You're going to have to opt in to look at something. It's not going to be on your feed. This sense of constantly checking is a ridiculous trait, because that's empathy. When you know the effect that you could pull a lever, be worth $50 billion more. Nope, not for the good of civilization. Seeing that in a room when you're constantly making decisions that are ethical by design, on a mission. The third thing is, I think that, how do I say this in a way that's not inflammatory? Being a pro. Really being a pro. You know, there are founders out there that want to punish the people that left them. They talk about them, they change the story. When that person walks out the door, they're gone. You don't talk bad about them. I don't care if you hate them. Pros don't do that. The reason I'm saying that is, remember frustration tolerance? I don't care what you're doing. You're planting seeds of negativity that are crushing the motivation of others. That is killing your company for the sake of your ego. Let it go. The more you talk about it, the more you bother. You're talking about it because it bothers you. You're hurt. This is regrettable. You're calling it's not. So I think the founders who are motivated to change the complexion of something that's universally accepted, and they're not at all costs. That's incredible. And I think the right people gravitate towards those leaders. They do. You're a healthy decision. There's something going on. You're trying to build boundaries for someone. I feel it in you right now. That's what you want. Because these founders that raise billions of dollars, that have 10 billion, market cap, they can get whoever they want when they want. What they want, why they want, when they want. I think that. And I think the right people have to be able to speak that mission. That's how you maintain motivation. If I get in a room and talk about the founder that I work for, I'm like, God, this fucking guy. What I show, I permit my team to grow. Motivation is shot. The company's not going anywhere. So I look for founders who make really ethical decisions by design when they don't have to. Anybody can do it when they have to. We're in a hole. No. So I think those missions are the biggest for motivation. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much.